health and safety will come to order. We'll start out with Chief Stempowski's report. Welcome, Chief. Go ahead and start when you're ready.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody's staying. The department responded to 11 incidents in the month of April for a total of 58 through the end of April for the year. 2 of our pickups we had to send out and have battery chargers installed. We hadn't had a problem for a long time until we got the MDTs installed into those units. So the way that they were plugged into the station through the window, we just had 2 small battery chargers installed. That being said, the battery charger for engine 96, which is housed down at station 1, that charger went bad as well. So that one's on order, so we can get that replaced and taken care of. We currently have online training set up for all of our personnel. We went through 24/7 fire. I have 2 of our training officers assigned to running that. Basically, it's since we're limited to our on-station training, that's actually very minimal. This online training allows them to keep up with their certifications and their continuing education that's required for their certs. So I'm optimistic about that. We've already taken advantage of that. Several of the firefighters have already logged in and started doing that. So it's a work in progress, but I think it's going to be beneficial for the department, not just now, but in the long run. We are having minimal training on station recently. So I did cancel it when all this started and all the guidelines were submitted. We're slowly getting back into it, but very minimally. Very small groups following all of the CDC and health department guidelines. Speaking of the health department, I just want to thank the Erie County Health Department for all their assistance. They've been great in kind of guiding us through this crisis. So kudos to them. They're doing a great job, as well as the other agencies, EMA directors, both counties. Everybody's doing a great job. The equipment, apparatus, station checks, we're still doing those. We can't neglect that. So we have small groups, individual groups coming down, maintaining the equipment, making sure it's ready. Everything's good to go. That's happening at least once a week, sometimes more, but obviously we're limiting the personnel with that too. So we just got to make sure everything's ready to go, following the same CDC and health department guidelines. The social club, I just wanted to mention with this, the discussion and recommendation of the personal face masks. They went in coordination with Cindy Rice of the AMVETS Auxiliary, and just recently they passed out 60 masks to the citizens of Vermilion. They are planning on doing another round soon. As soon as I get a date, I'll let everybody know, but I'm sure they'll post it somehow, however they post that. I believe the mayor posted on the city Facebook page, I believe. However, when that next round comes out, we'll get word out. But part of that also, the social club made a donation to St. Jude's for Cindy's work on that project in the amount of $350. So phenomenal job on her part. Thanks to everybody for their involvement. Also, the scholarships recently awarded to the 3 Vermilion High School seniors and 4 returning recipients, totaling over $2,000 through the social club. They do that every year, and that was just completed. So good luck to all those students, and congratulations to them on their achievements and scholarships. And with that being said, just hope everybody's staying safe, stay well, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chief. Does any comments, questions? Anyone?
No.
Okay. I had to have a comment. Thanks again, Chief, to you and the staff for setting up the mask donations and everything. That's wonderful. We do appreciate that. And yeah, please certainly let us know when the next round is going to be out for that as well. Again, thank you to you and all everybody that's over there at the fire departments, both fire departments, and you can extend our gratitude and thanks during this time. So we do appreciate everything you guys are doing.
I certainly will.
With that, thank you. That being said, we'll go to Chief Hardtongue with the police report. And Chief, before I say that, I just want to thank you and everybody at the police department for their service. If nobody knows, this week is National Police Week. It runs through May 10th through the 16th. So if you see us, you see our first responders, law enforcement out there, please thank them for their service this week. Thank you. And go ahead, Chief.
Well, thank you, Council. And also to you, the police. Our dispatch has been moved from Channel 2. It's back to the state. Our operations are back to normal. The BCI updates as far as the test for marijuana. BCI has come back and said that they have the testing available. However, they won't test anything under 100 grams. So unfortunately, this time that still doesn't give us a way to test for a casual possession amount. So we're waiting for opinion from the law director about which way we're going to proceed at this point. The radio project is complete. The new portables and new car radios have been installed, and the communications have received a 1,000% improvement from that project. Hopefully when things get us back to normal, then we can start revisiting the repeater and an eventual upgrade into a digital format. Lastly, we had another resident that was attacked by a dog. Her dog sustained some serious injuries. She sustained some serious injuries from that attack. So it's just a reminder that having a pet is a big responsibility, and always take care to make sure that your pets are secure. There's a lot of people walking about town and taking advantage of the great outdoors during these times. But we are seeing a lot of people that are walking their dogs and they don't have their dogs on leashes. So a reminder, if you're not on your property, you need to have your dog on a leash. And these last few examples we've had of these type of attacks just go to show the importance of taking responsibility, making sure that your pet's secure. Other than that, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chief. Is there any comments, questions for the Chief?
The pizzas were very much appreciated. that you guys passed out. That was great. That was great.
And kudos to Sergeant Mayer, Dispatcher Capriva, Patrolman Chandler, and Patrolman Davis. They came to me with that idea, put it together. They did a remarkable job, and I'm just proud to have people like that.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you again, Chief. All right. If there's not any other comments or questions, that concludes health and safety.
Okay. Finance will come to order. We'll try this again. Amy, you're on. The first thing is a financial update, I believe. For the general,
I need to unmute myself. Yes. Thank you, Councilman Brady. We do continue to monitor our financial situation, as always, but especially with the COVID-19 impact on the economy. One bit of good news that we received is that for unemployment claims, we are receiving, as a part of the CARES Act funding, a credit of 50% against any of the claims that we pay during this time. We are not charged at all for the extra $600 that is federally funded, but we are getting that 50% credit on any claims that are made. So that's some good news. As far as income tax goes, with our settlement that came in just at the end of April, overall we were down really just only about 6%. And it's really hard to say at this point, is that just a combination of the extension of the filing deadline, so people are not submitting those returns, or if it has to do actually with the current state of the economy. So continuing to watch that, as well as collections in our utilities department, to begin to monitor as the economy gears back up again, where we're at with the collection on unpaid utility bills. We are continuing at this point with not having penalties or doing shutoffs. So that's something we'll want to monitor as the economy begins to move forward. The tax budget for 2021, this year, the Erie County Auditor's Office is asking for us to add an additional year in that projection. So I have been working on that. We'll be modifying the current year because our first payroll of 2021 was going to fall on January 1st. And that, of course, is a holiday. So that's going to push that extra payroll back into 2020. And beyond that, I really don't have anything additional to report at this time. Things are going well.
Anybody got any questions for the finance director? No? So we're holding our own, basically.
Yes.
I know I read other cities have had to either freeze wages or layoffs or whatever. You don't see that in our immediate future?
Right now, I do not, fortunately. We've positioned ourselves fairly well at this point in time. And actually, I think Mayor Forthover has mentioned this in some of his reports, that we have a very bare bones staff citywide and don't even have some of the departments that some of the other cities have that are reducing positions.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes finance.
Good evening, everybody. Finance will come to order. We have 2 items on the agenda tonight. The first item is swimming pool fence requirements, and I have Steve Hullevax on for that one. Steve?
Thank you, Monica. Thank you. At a zoning board meeting last month, we had an applicant that came in that was looking for to waive the pool fence around the pool. And as we got into it, Bill DiFucci was there, and we did waive it under the understanding is this was an above ground pool at about 50 plus inches high. And we were talking about putting a 36-inch fence around it. So at that point, we have decided to rewrite the ordinance and present it to council under legislative. And need to thank Tony and Bill for putting this together at this point. And basically, it is the discretion of the building department. And if I'm wrong, Bill, let us know that if you have an above ground pool that exceeds the height of the fence requirements, at that point, they will waive the right to have a fence around it. And I'm going to look at Bill now and ask him, am I explaining that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. The way we're going to look at it is if the side of the pool from grade to the top of the pool is higher than 36 inches and the ladder to the pool is lockable or has been removed, then we're going to say that they have met the requirements of the fencing requirements of that code section. It seems kind of redundant to put a 36-inch fence around a pool that is in fact taller than the height of the fence.
Exactly. So that's why we're presenting this tonight to you, and want to bring it up for any questions among council itself.
Hey, Steve, I had a couple questions.
Go ahead, Barb.
One was, if in our ordinance it says that the gate has to be locked whenever the pool is not in use, would you treat that ladder the same way, that anytime that pool is not in use, it would have to be up or locked?
Absolutely.
That would apply the same. The other question I had, if when you have a fence around it, you have the ability to close that with using the pool. so that even though there's people inside the fence, using the pool, there's still a protection. If there's nothing there, I mean, could we ask for at least a fence just around the entrance? So people could come up and down the ladder and yet little kids couldn't get in there and just climb in. I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
I'm not following you. I would think that if the pool is not in use, the ladder is locked. That's the requirement. Now, if somebody's in the pool, then you'd have to be under the assumption that there's some supervision for those that are in the pool and utilizing the pool at that time. If there's nobody in that pool, then those stairs should be up and locked. There'd be no difference than a fence gate being left open, for example.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Tony, go ahead.
The other thing we wanted to touch on was the fence itself. And so we did add that sentence at the end of the ordinance stating that all the fences shall be constructed of solid, rigid material and secured in a safe manner. What we're looking for here is, in the past, I know I came across, and I'm sure Bill has come across, people that feel that something like a plastic snow fence was considered fencing around the pool or good enough to be a fence. And we're stating that that's not going to meet the definition of the fence that we want to see around a pool. So that's why we put that in there. And it is going to be up to the building inspector's discretion as to what is solid and rigid. But I think we made it pretty plain what we'd like to see there.
Bill, go ahead.
This is actually coming back to Board of Zoning Appeals this month again. I mean, let's face it, it's swimming pool season right now. So I have another applicant in my stack of BZA requests that will be on the docket again this month. I told him, depending on how the meeting goes and how it proceeds through council, if the ordinance is in place before he actually attends the meeting, we can withdraw his application. But at this point, he's going forward for the same variance to put no fence around his swimming pool.
Okay. Any other discussion on this matter? Frank, go ahead.
Yes, I think that if the administration is comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it. I think it's a good suggestion. It's logical. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Great, great. Anybody else?
So we would need a motion to have legislation prepared. And if everybody's good with it and we can pass it next week, since it is getting to be pool season, and these people can avoid going to zoning board if we're going to be changing the legislation anyways.
Great. Do we have a motion to amend this ordinance then?
So
We would
moved.
have
Mr. Taft
legislation
is-
prepared to amend.
Okay, I see Mr. Taft has raised his hand. Let's give him a minute to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Taft.
Thank you, Homer Taft, 3972 Edgewater. Just a really quick question. If a pool is less than 48 inches high, is it easier for a kid to get out in it? And is the lack of any fence getting up to it becoming a safety hazard the closer you get to 36 inches? Just asking.
Well, the original code called for a 36-inch fence. So that's why we're leaving it at 36 inches. So anything below 36 inches would still require a fence. But that's how the height of the fence was settled on, if that's what you're asking, Homer.
Well, I understand that was the ordinance. I'm asking, is that really safe? I know of other cities with other ordinances that require a 4-foot or even a 6-foot fence around a pool. I'm just saying, if you had a 36-inch pool above ground and you had a 36-inch, had no fence, is that as safe as having a fence? I understand if it's an in-ground pool, you're only requiring a 36. Maybe you should be requiring more there too. I'm just asking that question, or thinking that between now and when you pass the ordinance, you'll at least consider it.
Yes. That would be at council's discretion then.
Okay.
Ma-
Any
Maybe
other
we-
discussion on that?
We research some other communities and see if, we're within a reasonable height in the meantime.
we can do that.
Okay, do we want to go ahead and do that? Gwen, would you be able to look at a couple other communities and compare what they have for us?
Yeah, I was going to ask Tony and Bill if they looked at anybody else at this point that I can avoid.
I didn't dig into other cities' ordinances. I've talked to a couple other pool suppliers themselves and asked them what they encounter as they go city to city. They said a handful of cities, and they didn't name them, but they said a handful of cities look at the pool side as meeting the requirements for the fence. That's kind of what brought this to the forefront, was saying they go city to city and they see it. Now, by no means is that exclusive. Does that mean 50% or more, 75%? You know, I don't know the number. I do know that other cities, based on the dialogue I had with pool installers, see the pool side as meeting that requirement for a fence.
Okay, well, why don't we, if we can get a couple other cities to compare, in the meantime, do we want to go ahead and move to amend this ordinance and then get it on the book for next week, and then we could revise it if we need to next week?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, Frank,
Yes.
you have a motion?
So move.
I'll second.
Holmes,
Yes. Sorry.
Stark,
Yes.
Brady,
Yes.
Gahan,
Yeah.
Hollivax,
Yes.
Luca.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, great. So the second item on our agenda tonight is transient rentals, and I have our finance director, Amy Hendricks, on for that one. Mrs. Hendricks?
There we go. Yes, a few weeks ago, we had a request from the Erie County Health Department, and they were trying to contact people who were returning from being out of the area and coming back into the state about self-quarantine. And they also were looking for addresses for short-term rental properties or vacation rental properties to contact those owners about visitors and requirements for self-quarantine and things like that as of traveling. We used the addresses that had seasonal shutoffs in our utility system for those people who had been out of town. That was about as close as we could get. However, since the registration process has been discontinued for the transient housing, we referred them to the county auditor for that. So that brought up a discussion, and I had checked with Bill at the time, Bill DeFucci, and asked him the status of that ordinance that was removed last year, if that had been through any committee or any discussions. And so Bill is here to kind of follow up on that.
So I know last year we talked about maintaining our safety inspection in these units. And as of now, that's all we're doing. You know, we're going in when they call us, we will go in and do it. Now, they're under no obligation to call us because there's no penalty in place. There's no ordinance in place. I've kind of been doing some homework on this, and I've hooked up with a site called Host Compliance, and they're handling this short-term rental. They've had a few webinars. We watched a couple of those, actually 3 now. And they threw some interesting facts out there that, you know, the short-term rentals since 2011 have grown 1,530%. So they are flooding the market right now with the ability to rent these short-term. 1 out of 10, on average, 1 out of 10 voluntarily register. So they're not just coming forward and registering on their own merit. They're just sitting back in the shadows, renting to people, whether we do inspections or not. They're providing a service to these people. The company that we're dealing with has the ability to help us track them, find them, and really kind of force their hand into registering. I think we need an ordinance in place that we can stand behind so we can go after these short-term rentals and make sure that they're paying their taxes to the city that they're due, and they're scheduling inspections so we can make sure that they're safe.
Okay, great. So we had a committee that was looking at these short-term rentals, did we not?
Yes, there was. Actually, John Gabriel was sharing that, and he's not on council any longer, so I think the gentleman that is on the BZA, it's Phil that owns the bed and breakfast over on the corner across. He was great. He has a little conflict of interest because he owns a bed and breakfast, but he also is a wealth of knowledge about the subject. So if we do form a committee, I would suggest that maybe he could participate in it. And John was taking the lead
Okay.
at the point.
And Bill and Tony or Amy, does this group that you're working with, do they have like sample ordinances that different communities are using, or what are you seeing in your meetings that you're watching in your webinars?
They did mention that they have sample policies and ordinances from various communities across the country. The factors, the data that Bill mentioned is interesting on a nationwide trend. They also take snapshots of various communities on the Airbnb files and noted that our population, our number of units had grown 68% over a 12-month time period as far as the number of units. But yes, they have a lot of sample documents and communications that they will do for a very small fee per unit and be able to get those things in order.
Okay. So do we have a consensus? Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I think that's what Barb was bringing up. That committee, I went to the one meeting when Phil was there. And one of the big concerns is we have a territory or a zoning area, or it's basically downtown. That's what we had it in an ordinance that we were working with. And so that we could control it, one, and not have it all throughout the whole city. And, maybe we need to get back involved in it and get some more information from other communities. But we did try to keep it downtown, if that was how I remember it. And Barb, do you remember it that way?
Yes, I do. And that's kind of was the sticking point at the time, where we kind of left it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor,
Exactly.
did you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, I believe another issue that Phil Lorian brought up was the concern that our nomenclature is not consistent with what he professionally understands it to be. In other words, what's a transient rental, what's a bed and breakfast, what's short-term lodging. That's among the other things I think that committee was supposed to address, which would lead right into the service that Bill and Amy are proposing, which would address transient rentals.
Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It was targeted downtown because at the time they were only bed and breakfasts. That's the term that was used to describe the services that were provided. We've kind of superseded where we were when that was written, because now these are Airbnbs or they're transient rentals. There's so many different terms, pink elephants, whatever you want to call them, so many different terms that they're called to this point that we need a definition like Phil suggested that groups them all together and there's no loophole for anybody to get out. And we also have to decide where we want to allow these, because we want to give them full reign throughout the city from zoning district to zoning district, or do we want to limit zoning districts and say they can only be in certain areas of the city? That may actually get into some interesting legal discussions, but it needs to be either a permitted use or a conditional use in the zoning districts that we want to allow it in, and then a definition.
Right. Okay. Brian, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, what Bill was talking about. I know I'd heard through some conversation with some folks that some of these Airbnbs are popping up in residential neighborhoods where it's really not zoned for commercial use. So, and it's definitely something we need to look at for sure.
Right. Okay. Mr. Taft, go ahead.
I believe that when this was on the agenda for council before, I was one who spoke in terms of property rights. And if you restrict, for example, to 1 week or less rentals only in certain very small areas of the city, you might actually get into a constitutional issue on equal protection and other grounds. But in addition, my question to you would be, why should you? Why should somebody who has a condominium or an apartment or whatever, it's quote unquote downtown, be treated differently than somebody who has an apartment or a two-family or a lakefront property, a house or a condominium? You know, we are a tourist town. Some of what was proposed before tended to discourage, at the very least, rentals except to certain favored areas or certain favored businesses. And I think that would be, by policy as well legally, a terrible mistake.
Thank you. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, and I think we are in need of some type of legislation on this because, to Homer's comment, we are a tourist town. You know, the population booms, we all know it. We need the ability to know where they're at, be in them so that they're safe. And if it's citywide, and that's why I made the comment legally, I agree. You know, legally there probably are some conditions that exist that need to be addressed because we can't allow it in one and not the other without just cause. So the group that we've been involved with, you know, they monitor the tax collection, they locate the properties, they help with compliance. They also have a monitoring system, a hotline where people can call in. So when the place is getting maybe too rowdy or something is not being maintained, they can contact that hotline, get in touch with us, so we can go out there and make sure that they're following the code the way it's written.
Yeah, that sounds good. Does anybody remember who else was on that committee at the time? It was John and it was Mr. Phil Lorian and
I was at the meeting. I was at the meeting also, along with Steve. We only met a couple times.
Maybe we could have Bill in those meetings too. He's got a lot of knowledge.
Right.
Yeah.
With
Absolutely.
codes and stuff.
I
Maybe
think
get a
that's a good
subcommittee
idea.
going again.
Let's see, Steve, I see your hand up.
I guess that's one of the things that was part of the whole meeting was there was the young lady that her mother, Popovich. That was one of the big reasons why we got into this was on Edgewater on the east side of town. There's a house there and parties all night long. Residents, you know, this is where some of the issues in a residential neighborhood becomes a little sticky is, you know, this is not a family house. This is a rental house that turns out where people all night long are partying, keeping the neighborhood up. And so there's the legal end of it of where we're going to allow it and how much are we going to allow to bother the rest of the neighborhood.
Well, and actually that was a worse situation because it was a 6 flat.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just an individual. So you had 6 different groups of people coming in and out of there constantly, like Grand Central Station. So it, you know, even limiting the number in a building, you know, I mean, she's really running a motel. It's not just even a house that she's running. She's running 6 flats on a nightly basis. So it was really, it got really ugly.
Okay, Frank, did I see your hand up a minute ago?
Yeah, I think as since Bill and Tony are working with this firm, if we can, through them, maybe get some sample legislation from other cities as, you know, this, you know, a lot of things have changed in the last year. Maybe there's more current legislation out there that we can use as a model or work from.
Great, great. I agree. I think that would be nice. We don't need to reinvent the wheel if they've already got things in place that we can look at and maybe tweak them a little bit that would work for our community. Would be really great. Bill, would you sit down with maybe a couple of council members and get a committee together for us, and we will see what we can bring to. Do we want to bring it to the next legislative meeting next month and see where we're at?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. I'd be happy to sit in on that if you'd like.
Okay.
If anybody else would like to volunteer.
Sure, I wouldn't mind continuing. It's going to grossly affect Ward 4, to be honest with you.
Great, great. So Bill, let us know what works for you, and then we'll go from there. we can contact Mr. Lorian and see if he would like to sit in on that again, and we'll move forward with that.
Sounds very good.
Anything else on that issue? Okay, wonderful. We will close legislative for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, streets, buildings, and ground for Monday, May 11th. Will come to order. At this point, I do not have anything on the agenda. Is there any questions from anybody on council or the administration?
No. Is the Durapatcher out working? Uh-oh.
I think Tony's answering you, but he's muted.
Oh, can't hear him.
There we go. Yes, the Durapatcher has been out and they have been on Liberty. They're doing the most traveled areas first. So they're on Liberty trying to get that, and then they'll go off into the various neighborhoods.
Okay, is there any other questions? If there's no other questions, the streets, buildings, and ground will be adjourned.
I'd like to call Utilities Committee to order. There's nothing on the printed agenda. However, information from City Engineer Chris Howard this afternoon that we did receive an estimate for the lateral inspections on several streets, 4 streets in Vermilion on the lake area. And I would like to, if the balance of the committee agrees, at least give Mr. Howard some time to review the estimate and to maybe answer a few questions. Is that acceptable?
One question I had was, when they camera this, do they start and make sure that the south end is the butt end of the street and that there's no tie-in to any storm sewers or whatever, in this case, coming under Berkeley or coming in from the Y or whatever? I mean, they camera both sides, the full sanitary sewer, looking at laterals on both sides, but also do they make sure that the south end is a butt end, a solid end?
If I'd like to have Mr. Howard, if you can maybe review the estimate and answer a few questions, if you don't mind.
Sure. First, I apologize for getting this out so late, but I did not receive the price from Great Lakes Pipeline Services till late Friday. Their quote is obviously for the 4 streets of Roland, Cummings, Overlook, and Aldrich. What they'll do is they'll do a light cleaning of the mainline sanitary sewer, starting from Edgewater and work south. And then they'll locate every lateral that they encounter. And then they'll launch up the lateral as far as they can go. So they gave us a price per lateral. And then obviously I gave you a breakdown of the additional cost for the main line. They charge $1.25 per linear foot for cleaning of the main line and videotaping that. And it's $75 per lateral launch. So we broke down the cost per street per our last committee meeting in March.
What's the definition of light cleaning, if I might ask?
I think it's just their way of saying that they're going to clean it. I think those sewers are probably not that bad of a condition.
So when they camera the laterals along the way, so there'll be then the resident, if there's an issue, the resident will be advised of obstruction or an illegal tie-in, and then they'll be required to repair it, fix it, clean it.
Yeah, what we'll do is what we did for Harcourt. We'll do a breakdown for each street explaining the ordinance was changed, so the city responsibility is up to the right-of-way. So we'll define what areas, the issues, if there are any issues, where they're located.
Chris, like I asked, where do they start? If they start at the south end, that's going to be at the Berkeley end, right?
No, they'll start at Edgewater and work their way south.
Okay, and then so they'll end up at Berkeley.
Correct.
And then they'll check to make sure what's happening in either direction there? So that if there's any stormwater tie-ins coming out from under Liberty or anything, will they pick that up?
Well, they're going to run to that last manhole on Berkeley. Some of them don't run all the way to the intersection of Berkeley. Some of those sanitary manholes will run short,
Okay,
but Overlook, they'll go all the way to Liberty because that does go underneath the railroad tracks.
right. So the other ones, they would stop at the last manhole.
Correct.
Okay, so if there were any tie-ins on Berkeley, we wouldn't catch those then.
No, we'll know if there's an actual connection to that manhole or anywhere on the main line.
Okay. When we picked Cummings, how did we pick Cummings? Do you remember? I mean, was it just a shot?
No, I think based on the original report we did for the flow metering,
Okay.
I think we just picked the 4 streets that had the most I&I.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from anyone? Mr. Tan?
Thank you, Councilmember Luca. For Mr. Howard, if I may, with respect to the laterals, the whole bid is something like 14,000 some, but the majority of it is for the laterals. The laterals, I'm assuming we're not cleaning, but by definition, as we go up the lateral, will it determine 2 things? Number one, there's been discussion of degradation or possible infiltration at a storm ditch or the like. But number 2, as it goes, I'm assuming when you say as far as it can go, it's going to the house basically, and to the point where it would see that it's not turning out into any additional connections if possible. Are my assumptions correct?
Correct. When they run up, they're gonna notice if the pipe is separated, if there's root balls. They can run about 100 feet up the lateral. So I think that'll cover most. It'll at least get to the foundation of a house.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Mr. Howard, if I'm reading the estimate correctly, they're not going to be cleaning the laterals, they're just going to be inspecting them?
Correct. They're just gonna lateral launch up.
Right.
There may be some that have root balls and I'll have to stop at that location. So we'll let the homeowner know where in the line that root ball is, if there is one.
Okay. And the total is $14,392.50. Don't know if we want to just refer this to the finance department, have them analyze, based on our finances at this time, if this is something that you can safely proceed and maybe have it under old business, or would that be new business at the next council meeting to talk about? Anyway, I'm just throwing that out there.
So what, do we need a motion to send it to council, or what do you want?
I'd like to refer it to the finance department or, review and come back at the next council meeting with, yes, this is easily done, and then get a consensus if, council wants to proceed, if that's acceptable. What do you think, Barbara?
Yeah, that's fine. You want, Amy, would you mind looking at it and see if there's enough money to, uh-oh. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to refer this to the finance department, to have them, get back to us before the next council meeting.
Okay.
I'm fine with reviewing it.
Okay.
Do we need a motion for that, or you just want to
No.
request it?
Oh, okay. All right. If there's no more discussion on that at this point.
Homer Taft has a question.
Oh, okay. I didn't see his hand.
One brief additional question that I just do not recall from the past of Harcourt. Does it also indicate if they locate a clean out in the lateral?
Yes, they will.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. If there's no further discussion, this will adjourn the utilities meeting. Thanks to all.
Okay, just hit leave meeting.
Nah, I always have trouble.